Welcome to Left, Right, Center, where we are covering Colorado politics first on CBS News Colorado. I'm political specialist Shaun Boyd. We continue our Denver mayoral candidate profiles this week with someone I know and many of you know for her work at the state legislature. Leslie Herod is the first LGBTQ black woman elected to the General Assembly. She's been a state representative for 6 years, serving on the powerful Joint Budget Committee and helping pass several major pieces of legislation, including a sweeping police reform bill. Leslie is chair of the Caring for Denver Board, a mental health and substance abuse nonprofit, and she is a graduate of the University of Colorado and Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government program. Leslie, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Center. Let's start with an issue that really is front and center right now, school safety. In the past, you've said school resource officers lead to more kids being arrested, especially kids of color. Is it a mistake for DPS to bring them back?
You know, I was actually just with the chief of police today. We have been at numerous events together as we really think through and mourn the loss of lives around East and so many of our young people in our city, in our state, and quite frankly, in our country. I personally know that it's not my opinion. It's a fact that when we have police in schools, low-income African-American and LGBTQ students and brown students are disproportionately impacted and put in the criminal justice system. I recently introduced a bill a couple years back that said if we're going to have SROs in schools, they should be well trained. They shouldn't be there on disciplinary action, which they are at times. And additionally, they can't ticket or arrest for low-level offenses. Offenses that are in the disciplinary code should be handled by the school disciplinary code and with things like restorative justice practices. That's important. But in conversations with the chief, and I got to tell you, I'm proud to say that he's our chief today. He is feeling what's happening in our city very personally, very deeply, and he wants to make sure that the response is fair. He knows that bringing SROs back into East or into any of our high schools right now is a short-term solution that's begging for long-term, real solutions.
So some mayors oversee their school district. Should Denver's mayor?
No, I don't think we're there. I don't think we're at a space where the mayor needs to step in and oversee the school district. What does need to happen is there needs to be a better relationship. We are working hand in hand, not only to ensure that our kids have the best quality education, but to understand that schools are a part of our society. Great cities have great schools. Additionally, great schools are supported by their cities. Our schools need more resources. They need more support. They can't do this alone. And the mayor should be working hand in hand to ensure that we're giving the best quality education to our young people, and that the adults that are supporting them are also supported.
So I don't need to tell you, most criminal justice reform comes at the state level. Yeah. I want to ask you about a few bills that are making their way through the legislature this year. One would require kids 12 and under be referred to services instead of youth corrections for every crime but murder. The District Attorney's Council says over 10 years, 2,500 kids ages 10 to 12 were charged with violent crimes or sex crimes. All but 4 of them were diverted to treatment instead of jail. The DAs say what the bill does is it removes any incentive, any leverage that they have to get those kids to comply with treatment. Do you support the bill?
I do support the bill. With this 10 to 12 years old getting handcuffed and thrown into these systems that quite frankly weren't built for little kids. What this bill says is that instead of jail, there will be treatment. There will be community-based resources. We are spending too much money to incarcerate our young people every single day, not giving them a chance at really turning their lives around. What happened to a society and a community where we said, you did this wrong. Now, as a society, we're going to determine what to do moving forward, including your punishment, but also help you to retribution, right? Help you to understand where you made a mistake and how you can do better. Not just put you in a system that, quite frankly, might harden the criminal in you.
You were involved in the fentanyl bill a few years back.
Yes.
Do you support raising the amount of fentanyl a person can possess before it becomes a felony?
The way that I approach this is, and you know, my sister struggled with substance misuse all of her life and was in the system, in and out of the system for 30 years, low-level offenses, all related to that substance misuse, which we then actually trace back to trauma, sexual trauma she experienced when she was younger. I know and I believe that the punishment should fit the intent, right? So if someone is using for simple possession and they need help, we should get them help. if they're dealing, if there's other situations that are involved, that's a different story. And so for me, it doesn't matter how much you have on you. It's what is your intent with that, and how can we help you, or do we need to use an incarcerative approach? The weight limit, quite frankly, you know, and I know, doesn't matter, because fentanyl is such a deadly drug that if it's a tiny bit in one pill, that weight could basically lead to multiple people's death, but other times it's a tiny amount and it won't, you know, and so that weight doesn't quite matter. It's the intent. Are you dealing? Are you using? Is it simple possession? Do you know you have it? Too often we heard of people overdosing on fentanyl who didn't know they had fentanyl in the first place. If they survive that instance, I don't think that prison should be the outcome.
You know, Denver is down 200 police officers. What would you do, if anything, to recruit more of them? Would you raise the pay, and if so, by what percentage?
I would do similar to what we did at the state level when it comes to state troopers, and how we dealt with our budget at the state through the Joint Budget Committee, which was making sure that we reinvest in our officers, our training. Temporary pay increases weren't really what got us there. It was making sure that they felt supported, ensuring that they can afford to live in the city. And so my affordable housing plan absolutely has opportunity for middle income folks to be able to live in this city. It's all about all of that together is what's going to increase our employment rate across departments, but including in our police department.
Good transition into our next topic, which is housing. You've talked about declaring a state of emergency to address homelessness in the city. What would that allow you to do as mayor?
Yeah, I think that will allow us to focus our resources into getting people housed. We know that some of the alternative ideas like incarceration, quite frankly, don't work, but they're also very costly. So right now, it costs between $200 and honestly $500 a day for someone who has mental health or any kind of physical ailment to be put into Denver jails. Why would we spend that money to incarcerate people when instead we can get them housing? So we have a housing plan. It includes social housing, low-income housing, and middle-income housing, where we're using Denver land that we can build on to provide housing and support services for those who need it at the same site. These are the types of programs that we know work. We've seen them work across the country, and Denver needs to move forward in implementing them right here. And let me be honest with you. Let me be very clear. These are solutions that don't take a lot of time to get moving. We can get actually shovels in ground and housing built within 4 to 6 months. We can get temporary housing built even quicker with a partnership with the Village Collaborative. And so we have a lot of options on the table here in Denver. And quite frankly, it's a state of emergency because we should use them all.
You know, you talk about those public-private partnerships, among other things, to increase affordable housing, but since enacting the inclusionary zoning policy, where new housing has to include a certain percentage of affordable units, permit applications for multifamily housing are actually down in Denver.
Yeah.
So how would you change that?
They're down for many reasons. The number one reason I'm hearing from folks as to why they're not building in Denver, but they are building in places like Arapahoe County, Thornton, Jeffco, other places, is because our permitting process is unpredictable. It's too long, and they don't feel like they have anyone they can talk to move things through the system and through the process. That costs money, and they are building elsewhere. We need to change our permitting process, bring down that time, and take accountability when Denver gets it wrong. We also have to empower our employees to be able to make final decisions as to whether or not a permit can move forward quickly. The times that we're waiting 18 months, it's just, it's not feasible, but it also doesn't really address the problems we have in front of us. If we're not building new housing in Denver, we are behind, we are losing, and that's a huge problem that people are facing. I don't care if you're living on the streets of Denver right now, or if you're a young person looking for their first home, or if you're a teacher trying to stay in the city that you teach in and you love so much. We can't afford to live here, and it's breaking us.
The state is receiving $13.2 billion in clean energy investment, you know, thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act. How would you spend whatever share of that Denver gets?
Well, we've got to expand the climate office. I think that's one really important. Additionally, you know, I think about my neighbor, Miss Collins. She's 80-some years old. I won't say her exact age on TV, but she's living in an old brick home in Park Hill, probably over 100 years old home. There's not been many improvements to her home, and I got to tell you, she is nervous about letting someone knock on her door and say, we're gonna fix your windows or bring in more energy efficient appliances. but she needs them. And so when I think about what we can do when it comes to reaching out to folks in our residential properties that need to have those energy efficiency upgrades, we've got to have a team that's from the community that can actually ensure that that happens and build trust within the community. That's where we'll start. But additionally, we've got to make sure that our buildings, our high rises, our commercial buildings also are energy efficient. That's where we're seeing a lot of the misuse or waste or I guess missed opportunity right now as well. So we'll go ahead and expand that too. And then finally, I want to talk about something that I just worked on in the community, which was really thinking about our composting and our trash program. I, for one, am against the increase in the trash collection fee. It's breaking people who are already living on the margins. But when it comes to the goals of it, which is to incentivize composting and recycling, I think those incentives need to stay. But Denver's not doing very good at recycling or composting. We don't know how. And so I'd also support those organizations that are out there in communities helping people to understand how to compost, how to recycle, and ensure that Denver can lead the way on these issues. We
have time for one last quick question here. Do you think Denver should continue to add bike lanes, or would you eliminate any of them?
Yeah, no, Denver does need to expand our bike infrastructure. 100%. We have seen, unfortunately, too many deaths, too many accidents, and too many near misses, if I'm being honest with you, around our biking city, and there's many people in the city that want to bike. So I do think we need to expand our bike infrastructure. What I'm most concerned about are those blind intersections where, quite frankly, if you're a driver or a biker, you can't see what's coming around the corner. I interact with them on a daily basis as I'm driving, and they're unsafe. And so we really have to make sure that if someone is biking in our city, and we should encourage that, that there's safe routes for people. And right now, we're missing the ball.
All right. We're out of time. It goes so quickly. Thank you so much for coming on Left, Right, Center. Leslie is one of 6 mayoral candidates I've interviewed on Left, Right, Center. Due to the large pool of candidates, we are focusing our coverage on the top 6 fundraisers who you see on your screen. You can watch all of my candidate profiles now on CBSColorado.com. Up next, I'm joined by our analysts, Wadhams and Dino. We'll be right back.